Great Wednesday. Welcome to the Fully Human Connections podcast. I'm your host, King. I'm joined by my co-host today, Reggie. Reggie, how you doing today?
Doing well, King. Always good to see you on a Wednesday morning. So I can't wait to get going with this conversation.
Same here, same here. And, one of the things I always love to get into is the gratitude moment. I find that if I don't get into my gratitude moment on a daily basis, then I'm forced to react to things. And reaction to things and the systems that govern our lives that we live in is not going to be in my best interest, and I'm not going to achieve my desired results. So with that being said, I'm grateful to be in my gratitude moment. That's getting that started. I'm grateful for my life, my health, my ability to see, hear, walk, talk, stand, breathe, and have a sound mind. I'm also grateful for the opportunity to do this podcast with you, a mother who's alive, who has sound mind, whose love energy is still present. I can interact with it on a daily basis, as well as, again, I'm grateful for the challenges. The challenges that I have in my life force me to grow, force me to discover, become more self-aware, and also adopt the principle of self-regulation. So that being said, I'm grateful for the infinite possibility that this day may provide. How about yourself, Reggie?
Yeah, so I'm grateful for my standard gratitude is for indoor plumbing, a refrigerator that keeps fresh food cold. So my entire life I've had both of those things, which a lot of people take for granted. I still consider them luxuries. I get a warm shower when I want one, hot shower. So I'm grateful for those logistical things, and to kind of echo you, I'm grateful for relatively good health. As far as I can tell, a sound mind so far, and just one of my greatest assets is friendships. I have wonderful friendships. I mean, I include you in that, even though we've never met other than online, which we hope to remedy that sometime in not too distant future. But I'm just grateful for friendships, and the last thing I'll say is for resilience, not just my own, but the resilience of virtually anyone on the planet who's had to get through difficult times. I'm thinking specifically in this moment, but not only about the folks in Lahaina, Hawaii, on the island of Maui, who had that devastating fire this past week. So as they recover from that, I'm grateful for everybody around the world who has contributed to try to help them, and for the resilience that they're showing already.
Absolutely. Well, you're all set to walk us into I'm sorry, I forgot to ask you the key question. So from a scale from 0 being life sucks to 10 being life is awesome, what is your spiritual energy number in the moment?
Yeah, so in the moment, it's definitely a 10. I always joke that I've learned from you, and I'm not joking, I mean it seriously, that it's the spiritual energy is a choice. So I just, as an aside, I woke up this morning like feeling worse than when I went to bed. I had a headache. I don't know what that was about behind my eyes. And that has since, without taking any medication, I just did some practices and had a decent breakfast, and that has since resolved itself. But energetically, physically, I was somewhere around a 6 or a 7 this morning. But as I show up with you spiritually, I'm at a 10, because as my good friend King says, it's a choice. So that's where I am. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, with that being said, and thank you for sharing, I'm a 10 as well. I say it's a choice. And despite what challenges come into your life, if you allow yourself to be at the whim of the circumstances of life, then you're never going to be a 10. So I choose to be a 10 because the engineer in me don't see any value in choosing anything less than a 10. And when you choose a 10, you feel great, tap into the love energy, the gratitude moment, all that just really puts your barrier against all the noise and negative energy that's going to come at you throughout the day. So thank you for sharing that, Reggie. And with that being said, please walk us into our topic for today.
Yeah, so as always, thank you, King. And we're speaking about my book, which came out late 2022, Healing America's Narratives. the feminine, the masculine, and our collective national shadow, becoming more fully human. And what we've been doing in the past 6 or 7 weeks is taking a deeper dive into the 9 elements of America's collective shadow. And those, just really briefly, I'll name them: ignorance, arrogance, fear, bigotry, violence, greed, excess, bullying, and untrustworthiness. Those are the traits collectively that as a nation we deny in our history and in our current events. And today we're going to specifically look at greed as one of the traits of the shadow that really has landed the country where it is in the 21st century, along with its friends: ignorance, arrogance, fear, bigotry, and others. So just as an overview, a place to get started, the evidence of greed is everywhere. And it's important to note that not everybody, of the 330 plus million Americans, we're not saying that every American is greedy. In fact, more than likely, if we had a way to measure that person by person, the vast majority of people aren't greedy. But greed has informed most of the systems within which we operate nowadays. Just as an example, how is it that we have increasingly more multi-millionaires, people who every year make tens of millions of dollars as an individual? We have increasingly more billionaires, people whose net worth is in the tens or hundreds of billions of dollars, while there are people in this country starving or malnourished, where there are at least 20 million people now without health care. And a good friend of mine asked recently, it wasn't his question, he read it somewhere, how many homeless people does it take to make a millionaire or billionaire? Wow. So if we look at the healthcare industry, the defense contracting industry, which feeds war and is fed by war. If we look at one of the greatest examples is the pharmaceutical industry. One specific example of that was the Sackler family out of Connecticut, who developed OxyContin and was in lawsuits from the early 2000s. Currently, still, they haven't completely finished the bankruptcy proceedings, but what they did as they made billions of dollars for the company and for the family, as around 500,000 Americans died from OxyContin and other related opioids. As the epidemic of opioid addiction was continuing, they blamed the victims and just continued to push doctors to sell more of it. And they were rewarded by billions. And they ended up settling both with state and federal governments and class action lawsuits, which allowed that none of them would ever serve jail time. They could keep billions of their own money, and they had to separate themselves from Purdue Pharma, which was the company through which they perpetuated all of this. So, the need to continue to have, they already had billions. They began as a wealthy family. The need to perpetuate that at great expense to others, which is what defense contractors do, because people die based on their weapons. It's what many in health care do. And again, we're talking about the executives who run the large medical conglomerates, not the doctors and nurses and other aides. That there's this belief that you have to make more and more and more money, even though you already have 7, 8, or 9 or 10 figures worth of it in your life. So that's what we mean by greed, like an unmitigated desire and or belief in a need to always have more. And specifically, we're speaking about money. The greed shows up in other places as well. Power is another thing that where it shows up, but specifically around money. And it's been there for the life of the country. If you look at the steel industry, you look at the oil industry or the energy industry, you look at the tech industries now, you even look at entertainment industries. And I love entertainment and I use technology. And I think anybody who invents something or is good at something should get compensated very well. If you're really good at what you do, you deserve to be well compensated. But at what point does a professional athlete need to make 10 or 20 million dollars in a given season? Why does a particular actor need to make $10 million for one movie when most people will never make that in their lifetimes? So the systems have evolved, have been created in a way that feeds that. So again, we're not arguing that people who are really good at something should not be compensated well for it. We're arguing about at what level do you have enough, and how could you shift what you do in a way so that you're no longer taking more and more and more for yourself because you have enough if you live to be 120. So that's the underlying argument that we have here. And there's a lot of pushback on that kind of an argument because we believe we live in the land of the free, where there's no limit to your aspirations and what you can do in your life. And that's interpreted as, having 12 houses and 70 cars and, millions, if not billions of dollars, while many people are suffering and could use help. So there's one more point I want to make, but I'm going to hold off on it because I want to get into the developmental aspects of that. But I just want to pause there and let you jump in.
Well, again, thank you for such a wonderful topic and writing such a great book that I highly recommend people to read, particularly at this time that we're going through right now, because healing is something that this country needs. It's something that we all need in our lives based on the onslaught of negative information that comes from us, from the media, and from my perspective, I'm always talking about the systems that govern us that bring that on. A lot of people say the systems are broken. And I say, no, the system is designed to do exactly what it's doing, and it's not broken. So with that being said, I have a question for you as you talk about greed. Is there a sliding scale for greed? In other words, let's say a person has $50 million and he has an opportunity to do a deal that's going to help send him over the $100 million rank. Is there, and I know this is just from your perspective, is there a sliding scale that says I'm being greedy by going for that additional $50 million? Or should I be using that, or maybe I should go for it, but use that money more constructively to do something that can be of service to others in the world? And then even in doing so, might generate even more money than the $50 million. So my question would be, how does a person kind of self-govern, regulate themselves to say, I'm being greedy in my aspirations for more?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll be honest right up front is, I don't have and I've thought about that. I do not have a definitive answer for it, but I do have some perspectives on it. So one example I like to use, and somebody who's in the public sphere and whom I don't know and will never meet, I'm sure, but it's, Jeff Bezos is argued to be worth like $180 something billion, give or take. I don't know what the number is, whatever, it's like, I can't imagine that. And so the question becomes, in fairness to someone like him, when he began selling books out of his garage, and when he got online and Amazon was a bookseller at first, he didn't, whatever was going on in his head, he didn't know Amazon was going to be what it is today. He might have had some aspiration, but who knows what he knew. So at what point, as he began hiring people, should he have begun giving some away or paying his employees really, really well? Because obviously he didn't do that because he accumulated $180 billion. So at some point, and I'm going to argue, I don't know him, but he probably doesn't need more to live a decent life. That's a joke. I can't imagine, we hear these numbers. I can't imagine having $1 billion. I mean, I've never had in a given year $100,000. So these numbers to me are like way out there. But to answer the question you asked, we need to begin to look at development developmental perspectives, and that's part of what's in the book. And the shorthand that you and I have been using, the shorthand in the book, is 4 basic views. It's all about me, and when it's all about me, 180 billion isn't enough because I want to be the richest person on the planet. So I want to get to $280 billion net worth or whatever it is. So that's not the healthiest place to be. The next developmental move is about us. So I have this group of people, and the us is where most Americans live. And the us's can be, I'm an American citizen, I'm a Catholic, I'm a Baptist, I'm an African American, I'm an Italian American, I'm Republican, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Libertarian. You can pour anything into the word us. It's all these different groups. And that's where most of us live. We care about some group. The most basic group we care about, if we're lucky enough to have had a healthy one, is our nuclear family, our family of origin, mom, dad, siblings, if we have them. And that's great. So as you make money from an us-centric perspective, you want to take care of other people with it. Again, the obvious one is my family, my kids, especially if I have kids, and then, if I have grandkids, I want to make sure I leave them something. So all of that makes sense to a lot of people. But the next developmental move is about all of us. All human beings are my brothers and sisters. I'm one of 8 billion. And so at that point, especially with the suffering around the world, not just in America, at that point, it makes, if you really live in that worldview, I can, a lot of people can articulate it. I can articulate it. But to really get up every morning connected to every other human being, I know that they're all the same species and we're all in this together. To really live in that, not just being able to espouse it, there's no way you can accumulate hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars and keep it for yourself. You won't do it. You can't do it. So development matters. My view of the world matters. All right? A billionaire's view of the world matters. So back to the question, at what point I'm going to speak first person, am I comfortable knowing that I have enough? So that begs the question, enough for what and for how long? I've never lived in a way where I know I was taken care of financially for the rest of my life. Catholic school teacher, teaching poet, now a coach and an author, but I've never had the opportunity to live that way. Most people I know haven't. Lots of people do have that opportunity. They know that financially, that it would take everything falling apart, which might happen, for them to lose what they have. So my best answer to that question is it's going to depend on worldview. It's going to depend on somebody's real needs and manufactured needs and what they believe it takes to lead a fully human life. And if I need, so here's what I know, and I'm going to go out on a limb here. Nobody needs 5 houses or 70 cars or hundreds of millions or, God forbid, billions of dollars in order to live a good life. Nobody needs that. They might like the idea of it. They like more things. Having more things makes them feel good, but nobody needs that. And until we're able to develop as human beings, individually and collectively, especially collectively, to a point where we realize that together, some people will be governed by greed. Like, I worry if I give enough to my charities. This year I'll probably gross in the vicinity of $50,000 to $60,000, give or take, as far as I can see as of right now. It's in August. And I give to places like Amnesty International and Doctors Without Borders and Southern Poverty Law Center and Equal Justice Initiative, all legitimate charities, and others, Memorial Sloan Kettering. I don't give thousands of dollars because I need to eat, but I say, am I giving enough? I worry about that. So I would invite people who are sitting on 7, 8, 9, 10 figure net worths to get a little bit looser with their change purses and give some more of it away and help people in a different way, because you don't need all that. Now, last thing I'll say, I'm very aware that that's my perspective. People have said to me, well, if you had a lot more, you might feel differently. And I just rolled my eyes and said, no, if I was going to feel differently, I'd feel differently, you know, now, because if I couldn't work again, I have enough money to make it living in the Northeast United States for about 3 years, living really close to the bone, you know, some basic food and keeping a roof over my head, um, with a just, rent and all of that. So I disagree with that, but it's a developmental worldview. Some people think that they're successful the more they have and the more they can buy. And I can't convince anybody that they should see the world my way. I never try to do that, but I try to be as articulate and honest as I can in expressing, my perspective on that. So that was my, best answer, knowing that I don't think there's a magic number, and I wouldn't pretend there's a magic number. Once you make $5 million, you should be okay. I mean, what? Who knows? Once you make $1 million, I can't imagine $1 million. Because of my own personal experience. For a lot of people, that's chump change. So that's my best response.
Well, I appreciate that. When I asked you that question, and thank you for your answer, and as you gave your answer, what I've been thinking of or thinking about more specifically was the title of our show, Fully Human Connections. And the way I look at it is, if your desire, your goal now becomes your purpose, becomes to become more fully human, then I think that now governs your behaviors. It governs your perspective on how much is too much and then what you do with the money that you make, right? There is built in that mindset a set of parameters as far as how you begin to deal with your money and the value that you create into the world. And what I mean by that is, I was listening to, for the 80th time, the book by Stephen R. Covey, The Eighth Habit. And with the eighth habit, he talks about there's four intelligence. There's the body or physical intelligence, PQ. There's mental intelligence, IQ. Then there's emotional intelligence, EQ. And then, of course, there's spiritual intelligence, SQ. And what he talks about is that, animals have the other two, at least two of those intelligence. And then some advanced mammals have three, the EQ, emotional intelligence. But human beings are the only ones that have spiritual intelligence. That's what really separates us from every other animal on the planet, whether it's a mammal or not. And it's that spiritual intelligence that kind of governs our behaviors, that's tied together to a purpose in life, to a desire to do good, the desire to serve and make the world a better place. And my assessment, and it's not a judgment, but just my assessment of individuals who, as we talk about, are greedy and or have greed as their motivating factor. Like I remember the movie, I can't believe this just escaped my head right now. I believe Wall Street.
Wall Street, yeah.
And the character said, greed is good,
Yeah.
you know. And a lot of people believe that because when you grow up in business, you grow up and you go to business school and you look at people who are successful people, you mentioned the Jeff Bezos, the Elon Musk of the world. We look at them, and if you don't have that desire and you're not moving on the journey to become more fully human, then capitalism becomes your God in the context of your business minded. And that's, as we know, as far as unconscious capitalism, is the stakeholders' maximum value for your stakeholders. Get as much money as you possibly can. It never ends. Conquer, win. But what you miss out on is fulfillment. And that's what I advocate for folks who are on a journey or thinking about the journey of becoming more fully human. You tap into that spiritual intelligence and it governs and it helps you become fulfilled and you feel great about who you are as an individual. You feel great as far as how you move. Because we've had several conversations where people like Donald Trump, who, for all intents and purposes, um, seems very successful as far as someone who's reached the heights of capitalism. I mean, he pretty much became president. He pretty much evades prosecution. He stays out and he pretty much controls the Republican Party. I've never read about or seen anyone that has that much influential power where he determines who gets in office based on your affiliation with him and your association with him. So most people will look at that and say that's extremely successful. I want to achieve at least that or maybe even surpass the areas where they feel that he's going wrong. But as I mentioned on several occasions, I've never seen Donald Trump look happy.
Hmm.
I've never seen him smile. Same thing can be said about Elon Musk. I mean, when I see these billionaires, they don't seem happy. They don't seem like someone who's completely at peace with themselves. They seem as though they have unfulfilled goals and things they still need to achieve, things they still haven't accomplished yet, and they have to do that, right? So I see all that to say is that that's why I'm an advocate for spiritual capitalism. We talked about conscious capitalism. And I know that within conscious capitalism, the founder of the conscious capitalism movement, John Mackey, who's a former owner and founder of Whole Foods, he said that enough was making 10 times more than the lowest paid person that worked for him. So as a CEO, he won't make more than 10 times the lowest paid person. That was his parameters, being conscious.
Hmm.
Now, spiritual capitalism takes it a different perspective and says, well, I'm going to empower them to become owners themselves. So instead of limiting how much money I can make, I'm going to look at ways to empower and uplift so the people continue to make more money at the bottom. So that's where I believe that. And then as you become a spiritual capitalist and you put yourself on the path to become more fully human, that's a mindset for the moment because you're going to be on a continual growth paradigm. You're going to continue to growing down the road, and down the road in 3 years, 5 years, you may think differently and how you decide to use your money. See, for me, I have a set number in my mind as far as what I believe is in, takes care of my needs.
Hmm.
But then I also do want more money for the purpose of doing more good. I want to be able to do as much good as I want and serve without unlimited issue. I don't want to have to run into, I don't have enough to help this individual. Like I think I want to make it to the point where anyone who truly has a dream of doing something that brings value to the world and doesn't harm anyone or anything in this place, I want to help them achieve that goal.
Hmm.
And I want to have enough money in order to be able to do that. And so that to me is what I fight for and that's what I work towards. Not for me to sit here and, as you say, have 100 million, 20 million, like you said. The number is not really the point. It's the ability to sit here and have control over my time, the freedom of my time, where I don't have to do certain things. I do things because I want to do those things.
Yeah.
That's how much capital I want to have, where I can just do things I want and show love. So that's why I look at it as the opposite of greed is love, right? Love is the opposite of hate. Now, I say all that to say that for me is sharing my particular personal views and advocacy towards becoming more fully human, becoming a spiritual capitalist. And I just really believe that we've seen cases of people like Robert Williams, who was a great actor. And for all intents and purposes, and you look at his life from the outside, you should say he should be happy. He was a funny man. Everybody thought he was funny. Everybody loved to see movies that he was in. Everyone was happy when he made shows or made appearances, but inside he wasn't happy. And I wonder how many people are really battling with that inner demons. There's inner voices that just tell you, "I'm not. You're not happy. You're not successful. You haven't done enough. There's more you should do."
Hmm.
And I believe that may be the triggers that bring on the greed.
Yeah, I mean,
Until I said,
yeah, no, I appreciate that, and it's real. I love that. Again, when you and I speak, because we come from, different professional backgrounds and different personal backgrounds, and I just want to be clear that um, at this point in my life, I would prefer to have just to go full circle with what I said earlier. I would prefer to have paid more attention to making money earlier. It was just never motivated for me. Like I said, I spent 13 years teaching and coaching basketball in Catholic schools, and then I was a teaching poet and getting day work in various places all over the place. Um, and I just pursued what helped people and what fed my soul. And in hindsight, because of the society in which we live, it would have been more strategic for me to have made sure that I did some things that paid me better than a Catholic high school teacher and a teaching poet to take care of me in later life. But so I'm not against, so in my critiques of the billionaires, I'm not against making, X numbers of dollars. I'd rather have a really good, you know, 6 or 7 figure retirement account that I could rely on than not. Um, just for that, because as you said, it allows for the ability to get up in the morning, do the good work that you and I both want to be doing without, to use the cliche, the wolf persistently being at the door, worrying about the, because I did live for some years of my life, you know, worried about not the next month's rent, but getting to the end of the year. And, and I, that was never a healthy way to live. So just to be clear, I'm not against making money. In fact, I got really serious about it when I turned 60 or 61. Better late than never. But to your point of the difference between spiritual capitalism and conscious capitalism, I love that. Although there's a good friend of mine who says, well, how do we know that the other animals don't have spiritual intelligence? Because and I'm saying this partially tongue in cheek, but the dog, the bear, the fox, the hawk, they're not sitting around wondering if they're doing the right thing with their lives. They're just, in other words, they're tuned in to what spirit gave them.
right.
Not with language that as far as I know, they don't have structured grammatical languages we do. Although even that's not true, because there's more and more evidence that certain birds and certain mammals are sending specific signals with the sounds they make. So a lot of our illusions about our, fauna friends are just that, probably illusions, because they're way more at peace with their lives than a lot of human beings are. So it seems they're not questioning it always. But that's kind of a little humorous aside.
That's a good point, though.
Yeah. Well, I just once said to a friend of mine, like, that there's a great quote from poet David White who says humans are the only, creatures on the planet who question their own identity and their purpose for being here. And he goes, trees don't do that, blah, blah, blah. And she said to me, well, how do you know? I said, oops. So, that's a great question, because it's a different logical level of perceiving. Well, how do I know? I don't know. I really don't know. Thank you for asking that. So to come back to the focus though of this conversation, when is it enough? Because I mean, here's a great example, and this is not really a pushback on what you said, but it's a question that came up for me. So and I know this about you, that you're really clear on what you're trying to build, so you have enough capital in order to help people who want to build good things in the world. So I understand that. So what if Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos say, well, I need to have enough because what I really want to be able to do to help the world is space travel. Now, there's a part of that question I want to say, snap out of it, because we need to feed the freaking hungry before we go to space. But that then gets into questioning people's motives. So I don't know what to do with that exactly, because it's not my job to question other people's choices of what they do with their lives, unless they're doing things that really hurt others. Then I have a right to question that. But what happens if, personally, I don't think that space travel is what the planet needs right now, because there's not going to be enough space travel. God forbid things continue to get worse, as they're going to get worse before they get better, if they get better. There's not going to be enough space travel first to get everyone off the planet. The only people going to get off the planet are the already wealthy, people who can afford to pay for it's more than the subway token. Sorry, boys and girls, to get onto one of those rocket ships. And then, I hate to be this is a spoiler alert, but where exactly are you going to land? If you with your space travel, there's no place to go that we know of yet. So it's kind of a magical game in some ways. I just believe, again, this is my opinion, people with that, and again, to all due respect, I mean, Bezos gave $100 million to a fund full of Heine. Right? Great. Yeah. Why not give him a full billion? Right? Because if you got 180 of those billions, man, like missing one of them, what's the big deal? But again, I shouldn't question, giving $100 million, having the ability to do that is great. So it's a real slippery slope. I can point to examples historically and currently where greed is an issue. When we get to, well, how should this person navigate that, or that person, that becomes a more slippery slope, and I'm cautious about doing that.
Well, that's why I say that I think it really comes down to the self-regulation portion of, what I mean by that is, again, and my reference material is always Stephen R. Covey. I love his books, but he talks about emotional intelligence. He talks there's 5 dimensions to emotional intelligence. Self-awareness is number 1. Number 2, as you mentioned earlier, personal motivation, what's your personal motivation. Number 3 is self-regulation. Number 4 is empathy, and number 5 is social communication. And so now, with that context, that self-regulation part is key. Self-regulation, what I'm looking at from a context is do no harm to anyone or the planet. So you talked about space travel. To me, that's doing harm to the planet, because what you're saying is from a greed, that's still greed. I'm saying it from an observation standpoint. If it sounds judgmental, so be it. But you're saying that the earth is not good enough, so I'm gonna go somewhere else beyond that. And it's a movie that Total Recall, Arnold Schwarzenegger played in. They were in Mars, and I never forget this, because for the first time, what it showed me was that with the people, the powers that be, they can always control the oxygen, so they could just turn the oxygen off at will, and the people just have to suffer because people had to pay that to have oxygen. That's what I always thought about. Anywhere else you go on the earth, I mean outside the earth, if someone else creates a space colony and it is safe to land and all that, someone still can control the oxygen. And that's what I would never want to leave this planet, to give someone that kind of control of that precious resource. And so that's why I say that, if you're doing harm to the planet, then you're not regulating yourself, and you don't see yourself in a position of giving love and being more fully human. You can't. I mean, I'm a staunch recycler. You know what I'm saying? That's something that's a pet peeve of mine. If I see someone throw away plastic, or if I see someone throw trash on the ground, or doesn't clean up after themselves, that bothers me. I actually think that those kind of people that I wouldn't mind the police locking up and maybe doing some violence to a little bit to teach them a lesson. But at the end of the day, I think greed can control us. Again, going back to statements I've made on several different occasions, and I know you would agree with it as well. Either you're working your plan, or you live in someone else's plan.
Mm-hmm.
And now, if you're working your plan, but it's comprised of unconscious capitalism, that's comprised of being greedy, where I have to take more from you. it's a win-lose. I have to have more, which means you have to have less in order for me to be happy, or for me to be satisfied, or for me to win. Then that path will always lead to people having regrets later on in life, people having, because think about the Kennedys, another family that is pretty much the kings of America for the most part, the royal family of America. And but if you look at it from the other perspective, that family has a lot of tragedy. As much success as they had, it's been tragedy as well. Lots of tragedy associated with that. So that to me is the karmic guidance the universe brings. I rather have peace of mind, fulfillment, and connected to people I love, and feeling of living a legacy of service than to be someone who had so much money, but then I did things like, as you said before, I buy 20 cars, or then I go out and I buy a gold toilet. I just waste money on things like that because I have it. So, and I've had situations where I've had lots of money and I've done wasteful things with the money, thought that would make me happy. And I was actually more depressed. And I was the only time that I've been depressed in my entire life when I had money because I wasn't tapped into my purpose. I wasn't living, or I wasn't on a path to become fully human. I was just on the path to be a capitalist and make as much money as I can make. And I know what that did for my soul, for me as a human, as a spiritual being having a human experience. I know what that did for me. And I backed away from that. So I love being more in alignment with love and finding people who are in that space. Because when you talk to people who are in alignment with you and it's around love, it's around service, it's around become more fully human, much richer conversations, more fulfilling and joyous times, and you actually can even tap into the energy of blissfulness. So that's my perspective on that.
Yeah, so I know we're coming near the end. I just wanted to make one comment about the oxygen thing from the movie, that in fact, greed, and not just now, still now, but for, you know, decades, probably over a century, has um, both contaminated the oxygen, the air that we breathe through pollution, and through leveling major swaths of really important forests around the world. The most significant one probably is the Amazon rainforest and the big pieces of that are gone. But the very trees that take in our carbon dioxide and give us back oxygen to breathe, because people wanted specific kinds of furniture and lumber to make the furniture. Um, you know, I don't know how many millions and millions of trees are gone. So, because people wanted more and more things, and people would, make money by chopping down the trees, selling the lumber, manufacturing the furniture or whatever it was going to be, and then selling it at profit. All of that, um, basically, in fact, does impact our oxygen. So it's not so much as being turned on and off, but it's being impacted in a negative way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But we reached a point in the show where we don't want to just keep people doom and gloom. We love to give people solutions, and your book definitely provides solutions. And on the topic of greed, why don't you share with our listening audience what are some practical steps they can become to be less greedy in their thoughts?
Yeah, and so it's this one is pretty straightforward, and it's a simple question grammatically, emotionally and spiritually, intellectually. It has a lot of nuance to it. Um, but in any given element of life, whether it's food, which is getting more into gluttony, um, but if it's in terms of buying things that you think you need, if in terms of how much money you're making, uh, ask this question. You know, truly, what is enough? In other words, ask that as a very specific question in a very specific moment for a very specific issue. So, do I overeat? Again, we call that gluttony, really, but it's, do I um, overwork in order to make more and more and more? Do I really need all that? Do I need this thing that I just saw advertised that I want to buy? So in my life, in this moment, what is enough in every category you can think of? And really ask that question. I mean, go deep with it and see what enough really feels like, because it's more of a feeling than an intellectual choice. You got to use both. You got to use your brain and your heart and your gut, well, all three of them. But that I would offer that simple question, what is enough, or when do I have enough? And see what comes up.
Great advice. Absolutely. Like you said, tap into that feeling. That feeling can be an incredible feeling when you've tapped into, I have enough as far as material possessions, and how can I best go out here and serve? Like I tell folks, I think a lot of people are worried and they're suffering from being depressed. A lot of times worry is because you can't solve your problem. And I learned that the best way to solve, the best way not to be worried is to put yourself in a natural problem solver position that we human beings are. That's by going out and solving someone else's problem.
Yeah.
And then it takes your mind off your ego and puts you in a position of problem solver. And then that gives you a feeling that you talk about of feeling good. So with that being said, last thing we want to do is wrap up our show by showing examples or sharing examples of people who we believe, whether they're past or present, who've lived a fully human life. So Reggie, you want to go first with your choice?
Yeah, these are two people I don't know, and the truth is I don't know if they're fully human, but they seem to be really good and committed to what they do. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. And right now, it's two people who are in fact prosecutors. Jack Smith, who's the lead federal prosecutor in the case against the former president of the United States, and in Fani Willis, who is the state of Georgia, I believe, Attorney General. No, she's for the Fulton County Attorney General in Georgia, who's prosecuting the election fraud case down there. I've listened to both of them speak, and it feels as though they're really grounded and doing the thing that their positions expect them to do in a non-political way. So I just admire them both, and I would gladly retract that in the future if either one of them comes up as being corrupt or less than I think they are. But they seem really authentic and grounded. So Fani Willis and Jack Smith.
Excellent, excellent. And my choice would be probably someone I said before, but this person comes top to mind. Is Albert Einstein. And everyone knows who Albert Einstein is, so I can give a long reason, but I would say my specific reason for saying it today is just teaching us that energy is everything and everything is energy. And his willingness to give and see himself as a servant, sacrifice his life to gain knowledge so he can share with the world, not just knowledge for his own personal growth. I think that to me is the best example of someone who lived a more fully human lifestyle. And a person I would love to walk in his shoes and use him as a reference point of what it means to become more fully human.
Yeah. Great.
Well, with that being said, we want to bring our episode to a close. So thank you, listening audience, for listening to us today, whether you're listening live or whether you listening to this as a replay. And thank you again, Reggie, for writing a book, as well as bringing the wonderful topics and being present, being engaged, and being a 10 every time we do this show, because it helps keep me a 10, and it brings forth the energy of wanting to be creative and give love in everything that I do. So again, until next Wednesday at 10 a.m., everyone, wishing you all a great week, and please put yourself on the path to become more fully human. Until next week.